Okay, here's the gauges. Gonna get them wired up. Comes with some pretty cool harness. You know, for the lights and the power and the ground. For the gauges, there's the power and the grounds. Here's for the lights. Comes with a neat little dimmer, which you can mount on the dash, dim the dash lights. Calibration switch for the tach and the fuel gauge. It's also a calibration for the mile per hour, but it happens to have a button. Trip odometer, you know, setting, reset, and that type of thing on the outside of that. So, fuel, RPM, mile per hour, that's all kind of self-calibrating. The water and the oil is not. I just found out that, well, I called the people who make these gauges. And they want you to use the water temp sensor and the oil pressure sensor that they supply for that gauge. They say that the factory sensors will not work. There's a cable for the fuel level. Cable for the speedometer. Cable for the tach. There's some different fittings in there. And a couple of LEDs for the signal wire and such, which I didn't know I was getting. That's what I get for not looking at it. But I ordered some different LEDs to go in here because I need one for the brights, one for each of the signal lights, and then I'm going to put a light on there for the traction control when it's activated, and then also for the check engine light. So, the bummer is I've kind of got the wires finalized on the motor. You know, as far as wrapped up, tucked away, and then covered up with the heat shield and stuff. You know, and like this water temperature sensor, that thing's built into the loom. So I'm going to have to figure out if I can plug into the existing wires or if I have to use the other wires and reroute them, which is kind of a bummer. If I have to tear into that and redo it all. But if I do, I will, because what I don't want to do is add on to it and, you know, look like it is an add-on. So that's what I'll be looking at next, is getting these gauges, getting the gauges wired up. And I may end up shortening up this loom here. It's kind of nice having that preset, but it's a lot of wires to tuck away. I've been putting the sensors in and had to tear apart all of the heat shielding I had for the wires, because used the wires from the gauges for the sensors, so had to put that in there. The oil pressure sensor, I'll replace that completely. The water temp, I'm going to leave the one hooked into the ECU because it'll use that in the tuning, the mapping. And I added the one for the gauges back here. And I went around and made sure I had everything covered up pretty good for heat. Redid this part put a blanket around my starter. And the part I cut off of there, I wrapped around my AC condenser. I just use some wire, grab a couple spots and tie it up on there. It's got the back of it covered up pretty good. I don't know if I can show you down in there. So that took a while to redo all that. Thinking about wrapping the wires also. And I've been working on the gauges, and there's all the wires for the different senders. And I got that stuff mounted in there. This little thing here is a dimmer switch, or yeah, for the lights on the gauges. And I've got my indicator lights, starting to get that going. I'm going to plug those in to that so I can unplug this whole cluster here as a unit. There's my indicators. It kind of matches the gauges. Those are some pretty cool little lights. Different colors are 12 volt. Just plug right in. Green for the blinkers. I got a blue one for the high beam. And a yellow one for the traction control. I'll be able to tie into that, and that'll blink when it's engaged. And then a red one for the check engine light. So I'll get all that stuff wired into these connectors, and then I'll have to run wires from the blinkers into here. And the check engine light wire's already sitting there. Same thing for the high beam, run that over there, and then I'll end up with a wire from the traction control. And that'll meet up right here beside these other gauge sensor wires. So getting closer. Getting things buttoned up a little bit better. There's the ugly part of the gauges, and I just wound all that stuff together kind of an organized way. Spit it out into 3 different plugs. So I'll be able to reach in there, pull that loose, get my hands in there, unplug that stuff, and then take that whole thing out to be able to service the gauges or lights. So that turned out pretty good. Forgot to show you one thing. Watch out for the carbon fiber. Don't want to scratch it. Let's see, all these things have different ways of calibration. The speedometer, you have to drive a couple miles and use that button to calibrate the thing. Oil pressure runs directly off the sender, and water runs directly off the sender. and the RPM runs off a signal all by itself. Actually, no, that's one they do want. There's different signals that can be sent out, and it lets you change it. It's got this little cord, lets you plug in the back. And I'm just going to leave that zip tied in there and reach up underneath the dash, and you just hit this button to calibrate that thing. And then same thing with the fuel gauge. Plug that in there, reach up, do it once when it's empty, once when it's full. So I'll have 3 out of the 5 that I'll need to calibrate on the gauges. Got these wires area cleaned up in here. Still got to mount that. Leaving myself an accessory power still for something. And I still have my high amp wire still sitting down here for whatever in-car entertainment I do. So all the column, all the gauges, sensors, all that stuff's in. Everything's good to go. Still got to do the switches on the pedals. Still got to do a switch for the inside door handles. And I'm thinking about having a switch for something for the windows other than the touch screen, so you can just reach over and hit the windows without the touch screen. Got a couple little fans coming that I'm going to wire in that tunnel somewhere. And of course I still got the front and the back with the lights and a horn. Just trying to think here, what else I gotta do? Still gotta wire up the fuel level gauge and door poppers I gotta put in. So yeah, it feels pretty good to get it narrowed down some. I got a mirror with the backup camera in it, so I'm gonna get that stuff mounted. Kind of a cheap, cheesy little camera, but it's all I really need. It came with 2 cameras, which it has an option to run 2 cameras. It didn't come with the harness for the second camera, so I'll have to figure that part out. And you just wire this into the reverse lamp switch, which I'm not going to do. I'll just have it on all the time, and then I'll be able to turn it off when I want, or toggle between, like a front or a rear view. I'll probably put one of these up front so I can see the splitter smash the curb, and then one in the back, and then be able to toggle between them. You can change color and contrast, and it's got a little meter that is in there. I don't know if I can toggle that on and off, but little gauge to judge where you are. So that's going to be cool. I need to get the video cables ran with the rest of the loom and find a spot for that. And then it's time to start getting the Race Logic traction control going. I bought this from a guy who bought it from a guy. No, I don't know. It's been passed around. It's all brand new, never been used. And we got the traction controller. This lets you dial, 5 to 30%, I think, traction control with a wet weather mode. And I'm going to have launch control on this thing. Be able to hit a little button. Have the clutch held in, throttle pin bouncing off a rev limiter, which you can set and adjust. And then dump the clutch and the regular traction control takes over. There's all kinds of data logging that you can do with this thing. These are all wheel speed sensors. There's 4 of them here. Now, one thing that's not here is the toothed wheels that I would have to use if I use these sensors, I think. Maybe there's already one in there, but I couldn't. I don't know how you'd hook it up. Like on this front wheel, for instance, there's nothing in my head that's obvious. You'd stick a ringed toothed wheel on there. But these already have the sensors in them, so I'll tie into there, and hopefully, supposedly that works. And then this ties into the injectors, and it comes with some different plugs, so you can unplug it and bypass it if you need to. Here's some software to run their data logging, and then you can adjust different parameters. This is a pretty neat little unit. Pretty neat little unit. So that's it right there. So I think that's what we'll do next. Still been cleaning stuff up, getting things tidied up. I got my rear view mirror set up on there, so I got a front and a rear view for the camera. And then I got my ISIS dialed in with all the different functions which I have in the car. So pretty much every button that's on there is applies directly to my car. So we turn the ignition on, and now we got camera. That's the rear view and the front view. And I don't have the neutral safety switch hooked up, so we don't get ignition there for the starter. All the different lights, which I can work from, the stem here, or from these buttons. Road lights, 4-ways. I got to put a resistor in line to choke that diagnostic signal out of there. And interior lights and under hood lights, which I don't have hooked up yet. Door poppers. This is for the telescoping wheel, and that works from this also. Let's see what else we got here. I got the environment working finally, so I can dial in different fan speeds, AC, control the vents. So that's kind of neat to have that working. I got, one more thing, these fans. One for the front. That's a little inline fan, 4-inch fan. I'm going to bury that in the tunnel down there, and it's going to keep air flowing through there. You know, it's really loud, but I don't think it's going to matter in this car. And it's going to be nice to be able to provide airflow when needed. I'm also going to have a couple fans back here, which are going to be blowing that way. Also for airflow purposes, so be able to turn those on and off. And I got the wires set up here for the traction control. All those are wheel speed sensors. That hooks up to the digital controller. Power, ground, tach signal, and then all those are for the injectors. So pretty simple to hook up. All this stuff will be located right here, and then this will branch out to the different wheels, so not much to it. And I'm going to put the junction between those injector wires down in here somewhere, and remember, I'm going to make this panel removable. So if something ever goes wrong with that system, you can unplug it from the engine harness and plug your injectors directly back together and bypass that thing. So I'm going to get busy on that. And I got the locations of where I want those fans. And next thing I got to do is figure out the intake situation, how I want to run that. And then the body comes back off, and we'll make this car a runner. Get the go-kart working, put the suspension on it and all that. Get some wheels and tires on it and make a runner out of it. Well, I got the injectors wired into the traction control, and there's the connectors right there. The wires coming out from the ECU into the traction control, and then the wires out of the traction control into the harness of the motor. And that's a cool thing. You can unplug this here, unplug that, swing this over and plug it back in, so then it will bypass the traction control unit. Now I'm going to run the wires for the speed sensors. They got them labeled for me. Front left, front right. And there are some connectors